Hey everyone, I'm Max Parks and I'm here today to talk about art and public philosophy. So in my presentation today, I'll discuss one important method of making philosophy more accessible to the public through creating and sharing art inspired by philosophical claims and ideas. Here's an example of one of my older paintings, and it was shared by the Daily Nous website back in 2019, I think. Art, such as paintings and other images, facilitate the building of mental models and appeals to a wider audience than long texts, often filled with technical language. I'll focus primarily today on visual artwork, such as films, TV shows, paintings, sculptures, etc. But there are other forms of art as well, such as music and drama and others. And I take it that all of what I have to say about visual art inspired by philosophical ideas would apply to other forms of art inspired by philosophy. I'll go through a few examples of art that has been used to make philosophy more accessible to the public, starting with Trial by Trolley. A shortened version of this game is available at this website, and this is described as the latest party game from Cyanide and Happiness, the same people who ruined the internet. You're the operator of an out-of-control trolley and must make horrible, unspeakable decisions about who to run over. On the left, a kiddie pool full of babies. On the right, the scientist who will one day cure cancer, and you have to run over one of them. So it looks like it's a minimum of 3 people that's required to play. I'm still waiting on my hard copy to come in the mail. Some positive aspects of this game: it's interactive and more fun than most readings on the material. Many internet users are familiar with and entertained by Cyanide and Happiness. And this game allows people to reflect on moral principles and put them into practice. And it also encourages positive social interactions, which we could all use a little more of, I think. Some negative aspects of this game is that it's less educational, informative, and in-depth than reading directly from Bentham, Mill, and others. So there are also YouTube songs and videos, podcasts, etc. Here's an example of one.
I've read the works of countless ancient grumpy dudes who thought too much. Their books as long and laborious as final weeks untimely clutch.
Okay. So some positive aspects of this kind of material: again, it's engaging, fun, and more interesting than watching a traditional introductory philosophy video or lecture. But as before, it's less educational and informative than reading from the relevant philosophers or listening to a philosophy lecture. Next is The Good Place, the TV show. So although the plot evolves significantly over the course of the series, the initial premise follows Eleanor, a woman welcomed after her death to the good place, a heaven-like utopia run by Michael as a reward for her righteous life, but she realizes she was sent there by mistake and must hide her morally imperfect past behavior while trying to become a better and more ethical person. Here's a clip from The Good Place.
Made the trolley problem real so we could see how the ethics would actually play out. There are 5 workers on this track and 1 over there. Here are the levers to switch the tracks.
So some positive aspects of learning about philosophy through the show is that it's engaging, fun, and more interesting than watching a traditional introductory philosophy video or lecture, depending on who's teaching the philosophy lecture. But again, it's less educational than reading from the relevant philosophers directly or listening to a philosophy professor's lecture. So the next piece of art that has been inspired by philosophy and used to make philosophy accessible to the public is my first philosophy book, which I created in order to help introduce philosophy to children, ideally with the guidance of someone familiar with philosophy. For each letter of the alphabet, there's an illustration and text describing the illustration. So here's an example. C is for concepts, D is for dualism. Here's a picture of Ethan, the editor of the book, another grad student at UC Davis. Some positive aspects of learning about philosophy through this book is that it's more engaging and fun than a traditional introductory philosophy textbook. And as before, sorry, my cat's gonna drop in on Zoom. But again, it's less educational, informative, and in-depth than reading from the relevant philosophers and their critics or listening to a philosophy professor's lecture. Another negative aspect of this form of art is that it's best read to children by someone with some knowledge of philosophical ideas, which makes it slightly less accessible to the public. So my current project is mxparksart.com. And there I've posted pictures of paintings and sculptures I've made to illustrate philosophical ideas beyond what I did in my first philosophy book. So here's one of my paintings, Possible Worlds. I have a couple on the extended mind, Pessimism, Optimism, and Realism, brain in a vat sculptures. Some positive aspects of this kind of art is that it's more engaging, interactive, and fun than reading an introductory philosophy textbook. But again, it's not as informative or in-depth as reading directly from philosophers. So it seems like these kinds of resources, this kind of art, would perhaps be best thought of as supplementary or review/preview material when learning about philosophical ideas. So there are many advantages of the use of art which are not shared by more traditional methods of disseminating philosophical information and views, such as art appeals to a wider audience. So when it's possible for a philosopher to incorporate such art into their projects, they should strongly consider doing so, and in a way that makes the information as accessible as possible. So ways you could do this: use images and slides, incorporate Trial by Trolley into relevant classes, incorporate clips of The Good Place into philosophy classes, award extra credit for students creating and sharing their own philosophy-inspired art, and have students act out and perform some of the readings, such as some of Plato's dialogues. But regardless of whether the audience is learning in depth about philosophical ideas or not, making philosophy accessible through art is a great option. So slides with my links and references are available here. And if you have any comments about my presentation, feel free to get a hold of me. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.